Welcome to Culture Lab, Atlanta's F word. So hopefully you learn at least one thing about what not to do from what these people have learned the hard way. So with that, I'd like to introduce Kirk Brown first. Kirk is an old college buddy of mine from the Ron Clark Academy, and he is a man of a lot of great stories. So I'm going to bring Kirk up now to tell us a story about the Ron Clark Academy.
What's going on, everybody? Awesome. As Kyle mentioned, my name is Kirk Brown, and I work at the Ron Clark Academy. So super excited to be here today and to share my F up. All right, so everyone say, failure sucks. Failure sucks. No, say it like you mean it. Failure sucks. Failure sucks. Now say, I suck. I'm just playing. Yes. So no, really, failure sucks, but I think it presents the greatest opportunity for us to really grow, especially if it's encouraged in your organization or your workplace. And so that's exactly where my story comes in. So I'm the head of development at the Ron Clark Academy. A lot of you raise your hands. So for those who don't know, we are an internationally acclaimed middle school right here in Atlanta, in Southeast Atlanta, actually 2 miles south of Turner Field. I think we're the best school on the planet. We're a 5th through 8th grade nonprofit school. We have incredible results with our students. When they graduate from 8th grade, they receive millions of dollars in scholarships for high school. Y'all, it's crazy, for high school. And what makes us really cool and unique is that not only are we a really dope school, but we also train educators. We train thousands of teachers by the busloads, y'all. Every week, teachers are in our building learning about what we do and then taking our methods, our pedagogy back to their schools all across the country. 50,000 educators have come through our doors and learned what we do and have taken it back to their schools since we opened our doors. And so here is where my story comes into play. So it was a year or so ago, and we were about to celebrate our 10th anniversary. And so I had this bright idea, y'all. I was like, okay, this is gonna be big. I contacted my development chair, and I said, okay, we've gotta do this big event. Like, we mapped it out, the strategy, like how dope it was gonna be. And so we got it all together. And then I had to schedule a meeting with the bosses, so schedule a meeting with Ron Clark. And so I sit down, I'm like, Ron, I got it. I got the event. It's our 10th anniversary. We've got to do this big event. It's got to be our 10th anniversary gala. It's going to be a huge fundraiser. We can invite all these top people in Atlanta, these corporations, foundations. It could be a fundraiser for our capital campaign. Like, let's do it. It's going to be amazing, right? And he looks at me and he goes, Kirk, no. I'm like, bruh, what? Like, what do you mean no? He's like, no, Kirk. You know I hate galas. You know we hate galas. They take up too much time. They're, not a return on investment. They're boring. They're all the same chicken dinners. Like, we're not doing a gala. So I'm like, well, we've got to do it. He's like, it's a no. So you can imagine, y'all, I walked out of that meeting feeling deflated, defeated, like I had effed up. Like, what's going to happen? Like, how are we going to celebrate this event? So I went downstairs. I regrouped. And I scheduled a meeting for next week. And so I scheduled a meeting, went back, we were talking about what we got to talk about on the agenda is the gala. Y'all, I brought that gala right back up. I sure did. I brought the gala back up, and I'm like, Ron, we've got to do this. Here's why, da-da-da. He's like, Kirk, why is it still on the agenda? It's a no. And so it was a no. I think the great thing about failure, especially if it's encouraged in your organization, is that you are encouraged to figure out a way to turn that no or that failure into a win and into a success. And so I wasn't giving up, y'all. I scheduled that third meeting the next week, and it was on the agenda again. And so I go back in the meeting, I'm like, Ron, hear me out. Okay, so it's a gala, but what if we did this? What if we invited a big name to come to host our event? We could increase the ticket prices. It would be a big ticket event in Atlanta. Fundraising would go through the roof, and it would be incredible. And so he looks at me like he hadn't looked before, and he goes, okay. So y'all, I had his interest peaked. He goes, so who will we invite to host? Jokingly, I said, let's invite Oprah. Y'all, he said, okay, I'll just text her. Bro, what? He said, I'll just text her. And y'all, he really texted Oprah to host our event, and he sends her the text, and she says, yes, I'd be happy to do it. Pick any date that you like. Y'all, Oprah was coming to host our 10th anniversary fundraiser. That was insane. And so we get to the event, we're planning, we invite all these folks, the mayor's coming, all these top corporations, foundations, individuals in the city. So Oprah comes to our 10th anniversary event, y'all. She's hosting it. First of all, I'm freaking out like, yo, Auntie O's in the building? Like, this is dope. So Auntie O's in the building, but then she opens the event. She gets on stage, and prior to that event, we told her, hey, after you give your speech, feel free to go. We can slip you out the back door. You don't have to worry about pictures and all that. Like, we wanted to make it as seamless as possible for Auntie O, because we're not trying to bother her. But y'all, she got up on stage, gave a 45-minute presentation about how she loves the school and why she supports us and all this. And then she sat down in the front row for the entire show. We're like, okay, we might be onto something here. This is pretty dope. So she sits through the whole entire show, fanning herself, like jaw on the ground at some points, and we're like, okay, this is good. But then she gets up at the end of the night, y'all, and she got back on stage, and I was like, okay, this is interesting. So Oprah gets back on stage at the end of the night, and she does this. Well, first of all, here's a cool picture of Oprah at our event with our students. Gotta love it. But she gets back on stage, and she says this.
I am so moved by everything I've heard here tonight. I was going to say, I'm going to match your $500,000. I'm going to match your $500,000. That was what I was going to say. But I've now decided I'm going to give $5 million.
Oh, my God.
Y'all.
Hello. $5 million to the Ron Clark Academy.
Oh, my goodness.
$5 million. That's how moved I am by you and every student, every teacher in this school. $5 million. $5 million. Added to your $7 million. You got $12 million.
So, that's tonight.
Y'all, $5 billion, what? Auntie O just gave us $5 million, y'all. Oh my goodness. Thank you. And so that was incredible. And I tell you this because in that moment when I first felt like I failed, I effed up, and that we weren't gonna be able to do an event, I persisted. And I think the important part and the really cool part about our culture at RCA is that we are encouraged to go big or go home, to take big risks. And with that, you're gonna have some failures sometime. And it is perfectly okay. And so the good thing about Ron is that he engaged me in those 3 meetings. Every time I put it on the agenda, he's like, what, Kirk, what? But it's an incredible part of being able to have a culture that encourages you to fail and encourages you to brush yourself off and get back up again. And I think the cool part about failure as well is it's not personal. Sometimes we try to make failure personal, and it's really about the situation. It doesn't define you. And I think if you can just say, okay, how do I learn from this moment? How can I grow and really come out from this situation better than I was before? Then that's where the real success is. Look. If I wasn't persistent with Ron, there would be no Oprah, right? There would be no $5 million gift to lead up our capital campaign. And there would be no way that we would have raised $15.2 million a year later to this day, y'all. $15.2 million towards our $18.9 million capital campaign. So failure it can suck in that moment, yeah. But if you realize the opportunities that, hey, how can I make this a way for me to grow? How can I learn? How can I come back and change it in a different way? You can have success. Y'all, in January, we break ground on our new facility. And then with that facility, we'll be able to train 150,000 educators over the next 10 years at our school, just off of one failure that turned into a success. And so failure is not personal. Figure out how you can learn from that situation and grow from it. And I think we'll be all better off on the end. Thank you guys so much.
So, if it wasn't evident from that, Kirk is super passionate about what he does. He's super passionate about the space. So if you care about kids at all, I would encourage you to bend his ear after this. Be prepared to get out your checkbooks, though. He is a development guy. I love that. Thank you for that, Kirk. So I've known this guy, I think, the least long of everyone, but I feel like we've known each other a long time. You know, somebody's got that bear hug spirit, and you're like, we'd be at a cookout together in another life 20 years ago. So Ned worked on Aqua Teen Hunger Force and is the principal editor on Squidbillies. So if you're a fan of either of those shows, you've been blessed by this man's handiwork. An incredible brain in between this guy's ears. And I'm very excited for you to hear from this guy because Adult Swim is such an Atlanta institution and we're so lucky to have them as well. So I'm excited for Ned to talk about that. I have not a damn clue what's about to come out of his mouth and I'm psyched about it. Mr. Ned Hastings.
Okay, so I'm not entirely sure what's going to come out of my mouth either. My story is probably going to be a little less inspirational. There's no $5 million payday. It might even be something of a cautionary story because it has to do with the kind of hidden failure, the times you fail and didn't necessarily know that you had failed. I'm a video editor, which is sort of a strange job in animation. What I end up making are what we call an animatic. It's like a moving storyboard that we can give to animators, and then they actually make the eyes move and the mouths move and the hands and things like that. And I'm trying to make this as quick as I can. I started out as a writer-producer in the 90s. And I was writing my scripts, and then I would gather up all my tapes, and I would go to an editor and say, you know, let's string this thing together. Let's put it together. Eventually, I learned how to edit and started kind of editing my own work. And then I was laid off from Turner, went freelance, became kind of the guy who you could hire him as an editor, pay him as an editor or as a producer, depending on what I was willing to get the job for. Hand me the scripts, hand me the tapes, and walk away. And then I would just put it all together, which most editors don't do that, and most producers don't do that. Well, it set the table for when I started working with Adult Swim, and this story is actually from the prehistory of Adult Swim. The show that started Adult Swim in its way. Well, that's no, hold on. There we go. Space Ghost Coast to Coast. Okay, the first original show on Cartoon Network, I was still working at my old Turner job then, but I was freelancing and knew a guy who owned what we used to call a production house. There used to be all over town before you could do a lot of work on your laptop and get it onto TV. They wanted to get the show booked because we would edit these shows for 6 or 8 weeks sometimes. They had a room with an editing system, an offline editing system, no editor. And so they said, well, you do the edit test for them and do the work in our building, and we'll bill them for the work, and you bill them for your work, and that way we're kind of one hand to wash the other. So I did the edit test, and it came back. They loved it. They had several editors, I guess, audition. They had several editors that were just entrenched in their way of doing things, because the show had been on the air at that point for probably 6 years or so, 6 or 7 years. So I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good. I did my edit test, and they loved it. One of the guys told me, he's like, oh, this is the best edit test we've seen in a long time. So I'm like, okay, great. So the idea for their show, you see this is the familiar Space Ghost setup. They pre-interview, in this case it was Conan O'Brien. They do an interview with somebody, and then they take that interview and they chop it up and they write sort of their script around it. They take the people out of context. They make everybody look foolish. But it's all kind of in this setup. And the other thing you should know is that in this particular case, Space Ghost is a cartoon that was made in the 60s. And what they've done is they've gone and found shots of Space Ghost from the cartoon. They've cut him out of the cartoon. It's called rotoscoping. And then this set was an actual set. It was a little miniature set, a desk and a little monitor. That monitor actually hangs outside of my office right now. And what they did was they took little snippets of video from the cartoon. Sometimes it could only be like a few seconds long. And his mouth is moving, what we call lip flap. And they took the lip flap, ran it forward, ran it backward, paused it, put in all the little mouth movements so that then you could take this piece of video and cut it together to make Space Ghost do whatever you want him to do. It's like playing with paper dolls. Well, the script that they gave me was something called My Dinner with Steven. The guest was Stephen Wright, the comedian, who, I don't know if any of you guys are going to know this guy. The idea was that Steven and Space Ghost are going to be meeting in a restaurant. So all this gets tossed out the window. All that pre-work that they did with Space Ghost with the lip flap and that gets tossed out the window. I'm now dealing with sometimes 2 or 3 second chunks of Space Ghost on a set that's not been filmed yet. So it's a challenge. And I'm thinking, but they know what they're doing, and it's going to be a little bit of a learning curve, but they're going to understand. I'm new. So we'll start going. So the first thing I did was cut the audio. That's always the first thing we do. We start putting together Space Ghost's voice with the sound bite, with the clips of Stephen Wright, kind of start stringing it together. I get that far. They really like the audio that I've put together. So again, feeling good about this. Then we start on the video. And I'm kind of like trying to figure out which shots are going to work for what we needed to do, and trying to work with this sort of limited stuff. And the producer I'm working with is a little bit checked out. He's kind of coming and going. But I'm trying to get this thing put together. And the whole time I'm thinking, well, guys, I'm doing my best here, but I don't have a lot to work with. And things kind of fiddle on, and the producer's coming in. He's going, yeah, they just don't like my script. Nobody likes this script, and I'm still pushing it hard, and nobody likes it. I'm like, okay, well, we'll make it work. I ended up working on it for about 6 or 8 weeks, and the producer comes in and says, you know what, they're pulling the plug on this. We're going to try something different. And I'm thinking, oh, okay. 6 weeks, hey, that's great. That's 2 months through 2.5 months of work I didn't know I was going to have, and I was a freelancer. That was important. So I walk away, and I'm thinking, well, maybe I'll hear from him. But I didn't hear anything for a little while, and then a little while longer, and then a little while longer. About a year later, they call me back, and I got to do this show. It's called Fire Ant with Conan O'Brien. Took over from another editor who wasn't working out. And they said, yeah, you're going to be taking over this show from another editor. And I'm thinking, okay, great. Well, where's the work he did? And they said, yeah, you're not going to get his work. You don't even look at his work. Just start over. So this worked out great. This worked out fine. This show did really well. In fact, the guy I work for now, he still says it's his favorite episode. He was the producer on it. He had written it. And, that started me, really, at Adult Swim. A couple of years later, I came back and worked on the pilot for Aqua Teen Hunger Force. A year after that, when Aqua Teen Hunger Force gets put on the air, we actually did a split season between Space Ghost and Aqua Teen, and I came back and did more Space Ghost. 12 years later, we wrap up Aqua Teen. I jump onto Squidbillies, which I've been on now for several years. I've been there for 18 years. And always thought that the failure of the first show wasn't my fault, and I still don't think it was my fault. But I was talking to somebody recently, and they said, how did you start? And I said, I worked on My Dinner with Steven. Boy, did they blow that gig. I'm thinking, again, I can talk freely, I can talk freely about what a mistake that show was, and it ended up getting remade as a more traditional version of Space Ghost. But and the person is like, oh yeah, that's right. You were kind of persona non grata there for a while. And I said, really? I was? Yeah. Nobody would even talk about you for months after that. So it worked out, obviously. I came back as a contractor and then ended up being hired full time. And, I'm now, like I said, 18 years. It'll be 18 years in February. But I didn't know that there was a period there where I was nobody's favorite person, and that the culture at my office is such that they don't really tend to talk about that stuff very much. So 18 years later, I find out that I was kind of on the chopping block for a while there, and it's sort of a minor miracle that I got called back when I did, and was able to kind of, given the more traditional way of doing the show, was able to kind of pull it off. So again, no Oprah here, but it has to do with that was, and honestly, that's the biggest failure I've had at that job, which I can say that's a good thing. It's not such a bad thing. So I think that's it. Thank you.
Kirk, can you imagine Ron waiting 18 years to tell you that you biffed it? My boss wouldn't wait 18 seconds. Speaking of truth to power, that's a good segue. Twanna Harris never misses an opportunity to tell the truth, and that's why she is so beloved to me. I'm gonna do my usual call and response, stupid stand-up thing. Who's heard of the Beltline here in Atlanta? Yeah, one or two. You seen this? You heard about this? So the Beltline, no stand-up fans, no fans of the craft? Great, there's more beer in the back. The Beltline has been a transformative vehicle for the city in ways positive and negative, as Twanna and I have talked about a number of times. So Twanna's one of those people for me, and I'm excited for her to come up and share with you now. Twanna.
So I'm just known for giving it to you real. And so as we start talking about the Beltline, I think a lot of people kind of look at this amazing, fun, social space, and they're just like, oh my God, it's so perfect. It's why I live in Atlanta. It's why I love Atlanta. I get a lot of those feedbacks. And quite frankly, when we did a customer survey, we got like 80% of Atlanta was just enthralled with the Beltline. But behind closed doors, I will say that I don't have Oprah. I don't have the one failure. I can say that there has just been failure after failure after failure with the Beltline, but I will also say that that's a sign of being in an innovative environment. And I think that what's really interesting for us is that we're a quasi-governmental entity, and innovation and government don't always coexist very well. So I will say that I think it's great for me to give you a little bit of background before I get into the Beltline. So I met Brian McGowan, the former CEO of the Beltline, about a year and a half ago, and just met him. Was pretty impressed with what I seen, because he truly is like that innovative guy. But when I met him, he wasn't the CEO of the Beltline. When he became CEO was at the same time of a huge art fiasco. Does anybody in the room remember that? Okay, so it was on the west side of the Beltline, where it's a predominantly historically African-American community, and somebody decided that it was kind of artsy to plaster up a group of African-American prisoners that were in a rehabilitative program, that were like literally being transformed from their anger management issues through, playing with dogs, and like really being able to kind of test their patience on dogs. Well, the community was outraged. I personally was outraged because somebody thought that was art, and that's somebody's personal life, right? And so what I did that particular day, they were doing a live stream of the big community event to where they were basically trashing the Beltline. Fail number one, right? And I basically hit up the CEO at that particular point in time and was just like, listen, this isn't about art. This is about people not having a voice or a seat at the table. You got a bigger problem. Let's chat. And he responded and was like, let's go, right? This was 9 months before my position. Oh, did I just turn it off? Fail number two. Okay, so that was 9 months before I even joined the Beltline. Okay, so just giving you a little framework. I talked to him consistently until my job was created. Not filled, but created. That was when. So what most people don't know when we say, do you know about the Beltline? Are you familiar? Of course, Kyle was like, oh no, everybody knows what the Beltline is, right? But do you really know what it is? Do you really understand that it is a transit corridor? first and foremost. And most people don't. They're just like, oh, it's just a place to be. It's like a glorified sidewalk. We've been called all kinds of things, a lot of things that we don't align with very well. But as you'll see on the left, it was an old, abandoned railroad corridor that was like contaminated, drug-infested, crime-ridden, the whole 9 yards. It was just places that you just didn't want to be anywhere close to. And what we've transformed, we've taken that railway and transformed it into places where people actually do want to really engage, connect. And as you can see, our goal is to make it this like utopia, right? So we want this really perfect place where everybody kind of comes together. It's connecting, it's 22 miles long. It's connecting 45 plus different neighborhoods, right? We think that's pretty cool because in Atlanta, there's a lot of diversity around this corridor. This is the picture of where we're trying to go. But if anybody knows Atlanta, you know we're extremely diverse. And so on a daily basis, we get, oh my God, can you guys like get those dogs off the Beltline and the leashes and they block up, I can't ride my bike. And then the bikers are like, can you like, put a leash on those damn kids because they're all over the place. And then we get the scooters and it's just everybody wants the Beltline for what they want it for. Like there's actually, anybody scooter fans in here? Okay, does anybody like scooters on the Beltline? Okay. So that is the number one thing that is really going to transform a whole lot because right now there's an ordinance that's like literally pushing that because it is a transit corridor. It's not a place to be. It's not a place to hang out. I think the people on the scooters hate the people that are walking 5 people abreast. It's just a mess. So I think what we have to understand is that the Beltline is not just like this transit corridor, but it is a place that is going to help us understand how to share public space with people that we may not like. And when I say people, meaning bikers versus walkers versus scooter riders, it's just going to open us up to a whole lot of different things. But this is why I have the job that I have. I lead all the branding and the marketing for the Beltline, but I also have a deep focus on equity and inclusion around just different people that are coming together in a different place and sharing public space in a more appropriate manner. The biggest fail that I have witnessed from the Beltline since I've gotten there is if you see on the top, the Beltline was basically orchestrated as an architectural agency, infrastructure firm, right? So all they cared about was like laying concrete and like, let's plant these really amazing trees and the drainage, oh my God, like they get so excited about the conversation around drainage and, water retention and stuff, right? We just literally hosted 19 of the leading redevelopment projects from around the nation and the conversations got really deep about drainage and water retention. And I'm just like, but this isn't about infrastructure. This is about the people. This is about bringing communities together, connecting them in a really flawless manner, right? And that is the biggest challenge for our organization because nobody's ever thought about that. We have comms people that literally push out like, we're gonna do some new drainage on the Beltline and we're gonna do some new water retention projects and hey, we just laid 2 more miles of concrete. Isn't that exciting? But what about the communities that we're connecting? What about the lifestyles that we're actually recreating in the city and the opportunities that come out of that? We have economic development. We're building all types of amazing things, which are also employing additional people, right? So there's a totally different story that we've never told before. That's where our focus is. But one of the biggest challenges is we've come into this project with all of this amazing infrastructure, these $3 million townhomes. Okay. Where they do that at, right? So right now, a studio along the Beltline could run you almost $2,000 a month, right? Maybe 600 square feet, same as New York. So we have to be cognizant of the neighborhoods that we're coming into. If you can see on the property on the right, that's what's there now, and you're gonna see more of the properties on the left. And so for me, I think we have to really balance a narrative, and that's one of the biggest failures is that we went into this project being very development, very infrastructure focused, and not very community focused. So what you're gonna see moving forward is a brand that's gonna be more like this. This is what I do. So I come from like 20 years of managing multicultural brands on an entertainment perspective from private sector, so your big major corporations. And what I love about Donald Glover specifically is that Donald represents Atlanta so well. You know why? Because he's like the tale of 2 cities, right? So on one side, he's Childish Gambino. And he crosses all types of racial and cultural barriers. He bridges the community and he brings us all together. And that's really amazing, right? But then when he flips on this hat around Donald Glover, he's like unapologetically cool in his own skin, which means that he's proud to be Black. And I think that there are two different dichotomies in Atlanta to where we're just like, oh, well, you know, we love, we're going to cross all these racial barriers, and that's really amazing. But then when I step out into my community, and this is where it's always been for me, I really want to be able to walk around in my skin and be very happy with who I am and what I represent from a cultural standpoint. So this is where Atlanta's going to go. So my point to you guys regarding failure is that I can point out a number of failures that we've done. Anytime you're trying to be transformational, truly innovative, and you're really trying to like flip the model and disrupt, you're going to fail a lot. And it's something that our organization has gotten more and more accustomed to. But what the piece that I'll steal from both of my previous speakers here is that you have to embrace that type of mentality if you really want to push through the monotony of being the same old in terms of redevelopment and really go into something different. So as we approach redevelopment, we're trying to make sure that the new properties that we're maintaining are literally encompassing all of the things that we've said from a value standpoint that don't come across in the drainage and the water retention conversations. They really come across when the community says, no, we don't want that, we want this. You see what I'm saying? So I think you're gonna see more of that. You're gonna see more authenticity. You're gonna see more organic nature around what this culture is. And I think all of us kind of have a different perception, a little bit maybe overlapping, but there's so many different pieces of Atlanta that are amazing. And our goal is to go into these different, very diverse neighborhoods and make sure that we're not only building for the people who are already there, but we're also being accommodating to the people that are coming in. So that's it for me. You know, I would just say that as you go through this process, if there's anything that you do with failure, don't be ashamed. Don't be ashamed, don't be afraid of it. Embrace it and push forward. Thank you.
Twanna's a great reminder for me that the biggest failure is to never fail. So I mentioned at the top of the evening that Aynn was one of the first people I reached out to in this space, in the culture space, whatever the hell that means. We're a few years on. So Aynn has been a great mentor for me and a great friend. And we've actually we've done speaking engagements together about culture. So it's been nice to, in a way, I've ridden all of these people's coattails over the years, starting with Kirk. He's the guy that taught me, find somebody better dressed and more handsome than you and just be wherever they are. I'm a big fan of Mailchimp, and I hope you are too, and they're not paying me to say that. It's like the Bosley Hair guys. Like, not only am I the founder, but I'm a customer. I'm a big Mailchimp fan. I think from a cultural perspective, they do a lot of things right. So that's why I'm excited to have them hosting, and I'm excited for Aynn to talk about. You always want to know, like, if any of your younger siblings especially, you want to know that the good kid, the older kid, fails every once in a while. So that's why I like getting a dose of reality from somebody like Aynn for all the things that a brand like Mailchimp does right. It's nice to know that everybody's imperfect. So on that note, I'd like to bring up Aynn Collins this time.
My name is Aynn Collins, and I am a full-time culture person, which, as Kyle said, it's sometimes hard to explain to people that don't understand that. I've been at Mailchimp for almost 6 years. I'm the director of employee experience, which means me and my teams manage people from the time they accept the job offer all the way until they leave a very happy alumni, hopefully years in the future. So it's a really great job. I've been here, though, for about 6 years, and this role I've just been in for about 3. When I originally came to Mailchimp in 2013, we were 150 employees. We had 0 recruiters. The CFO at the time was handling all of that and hiring managers. So my good friend Marty Wolf, who's now my boss, she's our chief culture officer, called me and she's like, I want you to meet with our COO. We need help recruiting. So the first thing I learned about Mailchimp is there was kind of a reason there were no recruiters. When I met with the COO, he literally asked me to meet him at a side door, and we snuck into the building. He did not want anybody to know he was interviewing a recruiter because that would not be Mailchimpy. So I was like, okay, tell me about this. He got me very fired up about it, and I could tell right away. And I knew about Mailchimp. I was not a user, but I was excited about Mailchimp and what they were doing. But he got me very excited and pumped up. I have been in the recruiting and employer brand space for about 25 years in Atlanta, so I was like, I got this. By the way, Mailchimp loves gifts. I was like, I will hire all the people for you. This is going to be great. So I started, just couldn't even believe my luck that I got this job at this company. I'm about 20 years older than everybody at the company at that point. At one point, I'm so excited. I'm talking to people. I'm trying to learn. My first roles were hiring for engineers. We only had about 10 engineers at that point, and they desperately needed to scale up. So I'm talking to everybody. I'm so excited. I'm very extroverted compared to the rest of people at Mailchimp at this time. And I remember walking through the hallways, and I heard this intern go, "What is that lady? Who's that lady, and what's she doing here?" And I was like, "That lady?" But yeah, I was standing out like a sore thumb. But I was smitten. I fell in love hard and fast and went to Marty, and I was like, "Ugh, this place is amazing. It's magical, but I don't know why. Like, I can't figure out what's so great about it. It's great. Hey, look, if you look at that guy, he's saying magic, but it looks like Mailchimp." So I couldn't figure that out, but that was okay. Like, it was okay. People, they were very patient with me, and I was just ready to hire people. But y'all, it took me 4 months to hire somebody. I thought I would have hired 8 people by then. I was used to like hire. And why was that? Because when I'd get candidates in, the very sweet hiring managers and interview team would say, "Yeah, they're just not Mailchimp-y." And I was like, "Well, what do you mean? Like, did you not like their personality? Did they answer the question wrong? Do you think they're not qualified for the job?" And they're like, "No, it's just like, they're not Mailchimp-y." And it was like this gut feeling they had, and that's tough. So what we decided to do is like take a look at what Mailchimp means. What are we looking for? What is it? What can we like define that makes the people that are here? And I'll tell you, the original Mailchimp people were amazing. I could tell they were great. They worked well together. They were effective in their jobs. What is that? So we took like months to study what Ben and Dan, our founders, had hired naturally with their gut, to see what those things were. We needed to kind of figure out who it was we were looking for, so we weren't just like, they're not Mailchimp-y. So we needed that like purpose that we could all rally behind, and then the values we were hiring to. So this is a little sneak peek at our mission is to empower the underdog. And that means 2 things, I think, at Mailchimp. It's the small business owner, the underdog that's competing with the Walmarts and the Amazons and everything else. We are very purpose-driven about empowering small businesses, and we look at that as an underdog. I think based on a lot of the people we were hiring early on too, it was also people that didn't have a traditional education background, that didn't have corporate experience before they came here, may have not had like the polish and pizzazz you might get when you go work for another kind of corporation. And then we needed to look at values that we thought were really important, and those are humility, creativity, and independence. So once we figured that out, we started getting like second interviews and offers, and we saw really strong hires. So I was all, yay! Hey, by the way, these are employees. We have a Giphy library if you all want to check it out that's free. It's all in Mailchimp employees. So yes, we start making hires. I finally got those 10 engineers hired within my first year, and then it just started rolling, and our hiring needs really ramped up. We couldn't hire fast enough, basically, once we figured out the formula. Like, how do we find these people? Like, now we know how to choose them. So I'm all like, let's shout it from the mountaintops. Mailchimp's a great place. We're here in Atlanta. A lot of people are Mailchimp fans and don't even know that we're here in their hometown. Let's get on Glassdoor. Let's have a LinkedIn page. Let's do all the videos. And Mailchimp was like, that's not Mailchimping. And I was seriously like, what? Like, what do you mean? So I had to figure out what that meant. And I think what was really driving that is that first value of Mailchimp, which is humility. Mailchimp was not at that point good at tooting our own horn. They weren't good at saying that we're a great place to work. So what we had to do is figure out a way we could do that that felt in line with who we are as a company. We're not people to say, like, we're the best place to work for, because we're not necessarily the best place to work for. This is just a little snippet from our website now. That we say things like, we're home to engineers and artists, misfits and number crunchers, and we call ourselves a bunch of nerdy, cool misfits. So that felt right. It was finding that like voice that felt Mailchimpy in a good way. And if you want to go look at our video on the jobs site, we focus on employees and do fun things using medium like illustration and animation to sort of see what the experience is like at Mailchimp. And doing fun things like we have an amazing social team, even featuring swag, which is a huge part of Mailchimp. If you live in Atlanta in town, you probably see a lot of Mailchimp swag, and usually it's a Mailchimp employee, and I'll be like, do I know that person? But this worked well, and so this is something that the original Mailchimp, the employers and executive team and people that are making decisions felt good about shouting from the mountaintops. So we figured out what Mailchimpy meant when it came from shouting from the rooftops. So, and that got us to a point for the past 3 to 4 years, we've been hiring 200 plus new employees every year, which is nuts. Our recruiting team is incredible. This year we hired 275, and it probably will happen again next year. So that's all working, but we're a different company than we were. I'm gonna, this number is not right. That should say 2017, sorry about that. At beginning of 2017, we're around 800 employees. We've got 10 million customers. That means our customers are wanting more and more from us, and we have to scale as a business to meet their needs. So that also means we need to hire a different type of person. Here's another Mailchimp saying, this is our motto, listen hard, change fast. So we needed to really listen to what our company needed in terms of employees and figure out how we change to scale. That's something we do pretty well. But this is the problem. Our employer brand kind of was getting in our way of where we were going as a company. So this is an actual quote that was on the website around 2015. I'm not sure if it was in a website or an early employer brand video, but Eric Muntz, who's our SVP of engineering, the head of all of engineering, said, we don't waste time with meetings or formal processes or project managers. Like, we were really proud of that. In fact, today somebody saw me working on my slides today and was like, I loved that quote. It just made me feel I was going to work for a bunch of rebels. So the problem is when you get close to 1,000 employees, you need all this stuff, right? So that was hard because there started to be a need for project managers, more accounting people, more legal people, people that maybe didn't fit into the misfit, rebel kind of people. That's not Mailchimpy. But what we had to figure out is, how do we make it Mailchimpy? How do we look at people, not judge them because they came in a jacket for their interview or they don't have a sleeve of tattoos or piercings, all the things that I love about Mailchimp. But how do we hire people that really love that business vision of empowering the underdog, that can get behind that and have those 3 core values of humility, creativity, and independence? And what we found is, once we figured that out and saw those common areas, that we can have the buttoned up people that maybe have a more traditional background and GASP and MBA with our super creative people, and it makes a stronger, more scalable Mailchimp. So the lesson learned here is employer brand's really important, and we kind of did it late. So our company grew really fast, kind of unexpected, and our founders didn't start like a lot of startups do now with this is who we're going to be, here are our core values, and then grow to that. They grew, and then we kind of did a reverse engineering on what that meant. And so while that worked and it made our employer brand very authentic, it kind of held us back from knowing who we are and how to hire people. And then we got so protective of a great culture that I think for a while we were kind of being insular and like exclusive and keeping out really good people that could add to the better good of Mailchimp. So I don't think there's any failures either. I think all failures are lesson learned, and our failure, if you want to call it that, is just not listening and looking at what that meant at this stage in our company. So I think we've all learned that when we use the word Mailchimpy at Mailchimp, you have to make sure you can identify what that means and not just use it as they're not Mailchimpy or that's too Mailchimpy. There has to be words behind it that are relevant to the stage of the company we're in now. So that is our lesson learned. And I'm so glad y'all are here. I do want to shout out to Tamara Butler, who's back there. She's on the employee experience team. She put all this together. And Matt, who's here, a lot of our employee experience and recruiting team, we're here to greet you all, and we're just super excited you're here. So thank you.